This is Love More, Judge Less by Teresa Meyerhofer Christensen. Narrated by Teresa Meyerhofer Christensen. Dedicated to my 6 kids, plus their 6 spouses, and to their kids, and on, and to any others who helped me learn more about love along the journey, especially to the Omnipotent One, who knows the most on the subject and who has been trying to enlighten me on the art for decades. If you judge people, you have no time to love them. Mother Teresa. Introduction. In recent months, 3 separate people have shared profound stories with me where a deceased relative has returned to share in various manners and verbiage that the most important thing we can do while here on earth is to love others. Those who had passed on did not want their loved ones to miss out on the all-encompassing main objective of their sojourns here. This sounds so simple, so basic. Can love really be the ultimate goal during our stay here on earth? If these departed loved ones took the time and effort to carry their message and manifest across realms, it seems possible that it could be so. Even if you are a person who does not believe in life after death, perhaps it is still worth the effort to focus on loving others just in case there is another chapter or epilogue after this life, and that merely loving one another might be our designated missions in this domain. That is in addition to the fact love makes our lives more meaningful right now. After a year of COVID quarantine, a troubling 2020 presidential election campaign, and a book group claiming that anyone with my beliefs had to be racist, which I hope and believe is the furthest thing from the truth because it's totally opposite of my desire to love all those who cross my path, I woke during the middle of the night with the song, "What the World Needs Now," in my head. I often get inspiration from songs that come into my mind without any thought or request on my part. When I decipher the words that are playing in my brain, there is invariably a message for me. For the most part, the songs mentioned in this book came unsolicited into my thoughts in the wee hours of the night or on the cusp of moments between wakefulness and sleep, when the best inspirations usually come. Then the title of this book kept repeating itself in my mind like a mantra. I decided I'd probably escaped into my world of fiction for long enough. Perhaps it was time for me to reappear into the real world and write a little something that might be more worthwhile, or at least clear my thoughts with hope that I can infuse a bit of love into the discussion on racism and all forms of hate. Love hails from the positive side of the debate and turns discord into a more lovely melody. Of course, I realize I am not an expert on this subject from any perspective. In fact, quite far from it. This is one of the main reasons I've chosen to delve into and explore this topic further. I have no illusions that any of my works are masterpiece worthy, and know that in fact most are quite flawed. I also understand that any thorough study of the subject would be unlimited and unending, comprising volumes of data. However, as I write only what comes to me, I will get started on my tiny glimpse into the topic immediately, with an aspiration that readers will come across a tidbit along the way to help remember why we are here. Let's take a little look at love. Chapter 1. Love Begins. Where do I begin to tell the story of how great a love can be? The sweet love story that is older than the sea? Well, I certainly cannot begin at the beginning, since love existed before the world began and probably even played a part in its creation. Love has been around long before I had any understanding of anything at all. So I will jump feet first into the deep end of our current time, place, and understanding, and hope that I don't drown in all there is to know. These opening lyrics from the theme from Love Story have been stuck and swirling in my head for over 30 years, so I obviously haven't learned all that I need to learn on the topic yet, and likely never will. But that does not mean I cannot take a stab at it and bring a few along on this contemplative journey with me. Virginia Hinckley Pierce insightfully wrote about life, "It is all about how we behave on the journey." And I might add, or how we learn to love. Some of us get so focused on the destination that we forget how we behave on the trek there is the most important part. Feeling love for those we care about should be inherent, like breathing. As infants and children, most of us felt a type of love for our parents and caregivers. As teenagers, we likely loved friends of both genders if the resulting broken hearts were an indication. Then there is the grand, full-blown, all-out love when one person finds a partner to walk side by side along life's path and makes a commitment until death do we part, or longer. Most of us pick love like flowers all along life's roadside on our travels. However, some of my first comprehensions of specific, active, love-learning lessons came during my years as a young mother in my late 20s and early 30s living in Bend, Oregon. A few experiences while living there stand out as my early teachers on the subject, since my walk-in closet on Dooley Mountain Court was a location where I was first given the charge from an unseen source to begin learning how great a love can be. Into that same neighborhood moved a recently widowed woman with 2 young children. Her dentist husband had become ill and passed away quite quickly after being diagnosed with an aggressive leukemia. One day she shared a story of an experience that happened shortly after he died. It was the first time that I heard tell of this repeating message delivered from those on the other side of Earth's curtain. Though I have never personally experienced it myself, I can sense the sacredness, so will keep identities private. My neighbor shared with me that she was lying in her bed. I'm not sure if she started out awake or asleep, when suddenly she was completely paralyzed and unable to move. At that point, her deceased husband appeared at the foot of her bed to let her know that the only thing that mattered here was love and loving one another. It has been too long for me to recall the exact words he shared with her, but his simple message was clear and unforgettable. The experience was life-changing. My dear neighbor took the message to heart as a wonderful school counselor to many students who needed love, in addition to her own now fatherless children. Hopefully, we do not need to have a heavenly visitor to do the same. Children seem to find it easier to let down the barriers that prevent open loving. I worked with a youth group during the same time period, and just before Christmas and New Year, we had an activity planned to go caroling to a few underprivileged homes and deliver Christmas gifts as we sang. Each youth was assigned to come bearing a wrapped gift to give to one of the families that we were to visit, so that they would be more invested and feel the significance of the event. I still remember being touched to tears when a young man from one of the less fortunate homes which we planned to visit arrived carrying a Christmas paper-wrapped object, obviously a basketball, that he had brought along to give to a family in need. We adults quickly rerouted our stops to skip this boy's home without him ever knowing the awkward situation. An anonymous delivery to his house would be made at another time. This young man was an outstanding example of loving others regardless of what we have to give, as well as the fact that we always have something to give if we look, especially inside ourselves. The last bend memory on learning unconditional love that I will share is one that has become a family classic in our home. As happens in most families, everyone does not always do what they were asked or have been committed to do. Our oldest daughter had promised to take one of her younger sisters to participate in an activity but had not followed through on more than one occasion, leaving a very sad little sister. My husband, half teasing and very far from today's politically correct environment, asked the rest of the family in our vehicle if they thought he should spank our oldest child for neglecting to fulfill her commitment. Our youngest child, and only son at the time, spoke up for his big sister. He told his father that he believed Emily meant to do what she had promised and offered to receive the spanking for her instead. It was an unforgettable moment of love and sacrifice within our family, which taught more than any number of lecturing words could have. Pure love of one another is a beautiful thing to behold in action and changes hearts. And for the record, neither child received a spanking. Being taught love by the examples of others sinks into one's soul and has a lasting effect. Love exists in many physical locations in addition to internally in each individual. The tap just has to be opened for a full pour. The world is thirsty. After enduring many years in Nazi death camps, Viktor Frankl wrote Man's Search for Meaning. Partly due to his suffering, Frankl discovered a deeper understanding of life and relationships. Stripped of all else, he was able to see the contrast between love and hate more clearly. He shares with us in his book, "The salvation of man is through love and in love. The truth? Love is the ultimate highest goal to which men can aspire." He continues that no one can become truly aware of another human being unless he loves him and sees through that love the potential in the other person. By his love, the loving person enables the beloved to actualize their potentials. Translated, I believe this means that in loving others, we help perfect them by helping them fulfill their potential, and in doing so, we do the same for ourselves. Most people in this world are struggling with something, even if not in a Nazi prison camp. We often put ourselves in prisons of our own making. Judging others from our own point of reference will not assist either party in arriving at a better place, nor will it allow us to become the loving human beings we are meant to be. So, where do we begin to tell the story of how great a love can be? Here and now, with the next person in front of us. Begin now. Love them. It takes practice, but we can love anyone. Perhaps one of the first places to manifest more love is in our own homes. Sometimes we are kinder and give our better selves to those who abide outside in the world, rather than to those living in nearest us. What an inside-out and backward philosophy. Some people are easier to love than others, but those who are harder to love can provide us with a challenge and make loving a rewarding endeavor. They help us stretch and grow, sort of like the Grinch's heart in the story about how he stole Christmas, or Scrooge in A Christmas Carol. However, we don't need a Christmas miracle to start loving. heart calisthenics can begin in any time or season. The theme from Love Story Song ends with these lyrics. How long does it last? Can love be measured by the hours in a day? I have no answers now, but this much I can say. I know I'll need it until the stars all burn away. I also believe that we will need this life-enriching commodity until the end of time or forever. It is what makes everything else we experience brighter and more meaningful. Loving others makes our own lives matter more. The other Mother Teresa reminds us, not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. Chapter 2. Love Definitions and Expressions. If you ask a group of people to define love, each person will give you a different definition. That is, if they can put into words what love is at all. According to the Cosmopolitan Dictionary, love is an intense feeling of deep affection. Meanwhile, the Urban Dictionary defines love as the act of caring and giving to someone else, having someone's best interest and well-being as a priority to your life. To truly love is a very selfless act. Whereas the old Standby Webster's Dictionary describes love as 1. A strong affection for another arising out of kinship or personal ties, for example, maternal love for a child. 2. An attraction based on sexual desire, affection and tenderness felt by lovers. Christians use the word love frequently in their teachings, whereas Buddhists replace the word love with compassion, adding to the definition. Deborah Cox wrote a song called The Definition of Love for a movie about a spelling bee contestant desperately seeking to understand a word which is easy to spell but difficult to define. She wrote, Love not only feels good, true love always believes, and it gives without boundaries. It's willing to sacrifice unconditionally, so world, ready or not, here I go, searching for the answer. I'm not going to stop till I find where it lives inside of me. How does it come to be? What should it mean to me? Teach me the definition of true love. Languages other than English have various words for love that give it more depth and breadth. Unfortunately, English has just one word that can mean many different things, making it extremely difficult to define and describe. The Hebrew and Greek languages offer far better examples to help us identify the aspects of this elusive word. Of the 3 Hebrew words for love, hesed is my favorite and is arguably the most significant word for love in the Bible. It is translated as loving kindness, because no single word in Greek or English language has any equivalent for us to use. Fidelity, loyalty, patience, mercy, grace, forgiveness, covenantal faithfulness, and salvation are all concepts tied up with God's loving kindness, or hesed. A deep dive into hesed is out of the scope of this brief discussion on love, but I wanted to at least introduce it. The Hebrew word ahab means merely to love with no special significance, and dod connotates romantic love. Not surprisingly, dod is used throughout the Song of Solomon. The Greeks give us even more options with 8 different types of love to ponder. Philia is affectionate love without any romantic attraction that occurs between friends or family members, a love that runs deep and true. Pragma is enduring, mature love that deepens over time. Storge represents the familial love that flows between children and parents or childhood friends. Eros speaks of romantic love, including personal infatuation and romantic pleasure. Ludes is a playful love, like flirting, often seen in the beginning stages of intimate love. Mania is often all-consuming love or unhealthy obsessiveness to madness over a love partner. Philanthia is self-love, displayed by having healthy self-compassion love towards oneself. And agape means selfless love, an empathetic attitude of love towards everyone and anyone. With so many types of love to choose from, we should be able to find some form to embrace or to wield while keeping hate at bay. I believe I've experienced each of these at various times and in various degrees during my lifetime. Maybe not mania, hopefully not mania. All the rest offer healthy, elevating options of loving one another. There is so much to learn about love and experience by love. Over a decade ago, I was asked to speak on the topic of charity 4 Decembers in a row. That should have given me a heads up that the universe thought there was something more I needed to learn on this subject of love. What exactly is charity? Today the word brings to mind free handouts or maybe organizations that collect money. In a more insightful observation of the word, Dallin H. Oakes stated, "Charity is not an act, but a condition or state of being." By that definition, charity is something that happens inside of us, not out. It is a noun, not a verb. It is not the giving, but the thing that motivates us to give. Charity is an advanced or elevated version of love. I desire to learn how to love better, even to the level of developing pure charity. Loving is a choice. We can and must love more than those who are easy to love. I believe love is a power that makes both the giver and the receiver whole and filled. Every person is worthy of love. Expressions of love vary depending on the type of association. In today's society, sex has become casual. Yet the briefest of human contact can be construed as inappropriate or deemed as harassment, causing a world where people are often afraid to touch at all. Even hugs can be misconstrued. But an embrace can be a needed expression of love in all the approved categories unless they have been banned or considered unauthorized in certain environments. Permission from the recipient may be required and is the safest way to proceed. A hug is an embrace, a closeness, a holding or a squeeze not sexual in nature. It can change both the hugger and the huggee when administered at the correct moment. Both can feel and respond to feelings of love, caring, and support. Gentle, non-constraining embraces can create a feeling of well-being and acceptance. They can comfort, console, and relieve tension. A simple hug can calm, quiet, and refresh us. A healthy hug can help us realize that all is well in the world. There are different types of hugs: the bear hug, cheek hug, side-to-side hug, or group hugs. Any will do in a pinch. A hug costs nothing, but the payback is priceless. Hugs are portable. You can carry them with you wherever you go and never run out. They are medicinal and one size fits all. If a person's not comfortable with a physical hug, non-hug embraces, such as verbal squeeze of kind words, a warm wink, or a gentle touch on the arm can be given and may be all that is needed. With the increase of isolating screen time, non-virtual personal communication is especially vital so that we do not lose those connections that make us more human. Make sure others not only feel loved, but know that their existence matters. Words are invaluable, but sometimes a physical embrace says, "I care." When we fumble with verbal expressions of love, it might take time to figure out the best way to express your love. In his book, You Are Special, Words of Wisdom for All Ages from a Beloved Neighbor, Mr. Rogers tells us that love isn't effortless. You can care about someone easily, but to continue to care about them as they grow and change sometimes causes pain. Fred Rogers, the man who gave generations of children gentle advice, shared that love isn't a state of perfect caring. It is an active noun like struggle. Some things are worth working for, and love is almost always worth the extra effort. Since in the previous chapter I suggested beginning our focus by loving those nearest us, I will as well. Everyone has had a mother at some point. A mother's love for her child often begins at its inception. Physically and emotionally, mothers at times find it difficult to separate themselves from that intense mother-bear union, whether they carried and nurtured the infant in their womb or fought to acquire the child through adoption. The desire to love and nurture never goes away, and sometimes, as children grow towards adulthood, mothers are not quite sure what to do with this love that is not abated. Children who are recipients of that love often don't quite know what to do with it either. Mothers continue to lug their love around, passing it off as much as a child will accept. Many fathers today fall into this category, having become super nurturers in their own right. Parental love is powerful and does not diminish with age. Perhaps some brilliant soul could invent a love version of food banks, or sanctuaries to store wholesome excess love so that it might be available for others in desperate need. These refuges may already exist under alternate names. If not, creating one could be a blessed humanitarian endeavor. Then for some, there is also the ever-growing and evolving love for a spouse or significant other. It is interesting to look back at all that couples have loved each other imperfectly yet consistently throughout. To have had a front row seat witnessing another's growth, change, evolution, disappointments, heartaches, lacks, all of it is truly amazing and an intimate thing. Many of these experiences belong to a couple together, yet they remain two separate people with different approaches, ways of thinking and feeling. A friend sharing insights on love said that her mother used to say it was a miracle that any marriage has made it. It probably is a miracle, but it's a beautiful one where we gain the capacity to grow and keep loving and thereby strengthening the individual, couple, and the family unit as a whole. Recently, my octogenarian father made the decision to care for my mother in their own home until he is no longer able or until she no longer knows who he is. My mother, who has always been more of the nurturer in the relationship, is now suffering from Alzheimer's disease, along with extreme physical weakness to the point that she can no longer walk. They sold their home of 50 years to move into a single-level dwelling where my father sits beside my mother on their leather love seat for much of each day, holding her hand while reminding her repeatedly how beautiful she is and how much she is loved, because she is frightened and forgets immediately after he tells her each time. Reality has flown out of their lives, and my mother asks regularly to go home. But my father hangs in there, expressing unfaltering love. It is a tender scene to behold and touches my daughter's heart. In over 60 years of marriage, my dad has certainly learned how to love his spouse more than himself. Not all of us will be able to get to that place, but I am blessed by their example. I'm acutely aware that not everyone has a partner or a traditional family to shower love upon, but hopefully, most of us have someone that we can hold close mentally or physically to begin practicing at least one definition or expression of love. Perhaps the first recipient of that love should be ourselves. Chapter 3, Love of Self. Let me begin this chapter by clarifying that our discussion on self-love is not about narcissism. It is indeed about the total opposite. Developing a healthy appreciation and acceptance for who we are, regardless of our outward appearance and any other glaring flaws that we see in our mirrors or have created in our own minds. Self-doubt and negative thought are rampant today and only serve to sink our already floundering self-ships. There is even a disorder called self-love deficit disorder, or SLDD. People with it find themselves chronically in unhealthy and unbalanced relationships where they give most of the love, respect, and care only to receive nothing in return. This diagnosis was formerly referred to as codependency. According to the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation, self-love is a state of appreciation for oneself that grows from actions that support our physical, psychological, and spiritual growth. Self-love means having a high regard for your own well-being and happiness. Self-love means taking care of your needs and not sacrificing your well-being to please others. Loving ourselves usually comes by gently facing what we hate most about ourselves. Maybe it's a body part or multiple body parts, or the way we treated someone, or guilt or shame about a situation. The thing is, until we can really shine a light on our insecurities, we will never truly be accepting of our own total selves. An article published on Healthline in 2018 suggested 13 steps to achieving total self-love. I'm not sure I can totally agree with number 11, so please use that suggestion in moderation, lest it cause you added grief, which will then increase self-loathing rather than self-love. I would also add exclamation marks to numbers 1 and 4, and I adore number 12. Number 1. Stop comparing yourself to others. Number 2. Don't worry about others' opinions. Number 3. Allow yourself to make mistakes. Number 4. Remember your value doesn't lie in how your body looks. Number 5. Don't be afraid to let go of toxic people. Number 6. Process your fears. Number 7. Trust yourself to make good decisions for yourself. Number 8. Take every opportunity life presents or create your own. Number 9. Put yourself first. Number 10. Feel pain and joy as fully as you can. Number 11. Exercise boldness in public. Number 12. See beauty in simple things. Number 13. Be kind to yourself. The world is full of harsh words and critique. Don't add yours to the mix. Speak kindly to yourself and don't call yourself mean things. My inner dialogue is often quite skilled at negative talk. The suggestions from the author of this article to stop comparing ourselves to others and to remember that our value does not lie in how our body looks hit so close to home. I've spent too much time worrying about weight throughout the years, pretty much my whole life. Life is full of weighty matters, but our weight should not be one of them. I look back at pictures from when I was much younger and much slimmer and now wish I looked the way I did back then when I was also lamenting my size and appearance. I was blessed with a healthy, strong body and should not have let thoughts on my weight derail more positive ones. What a waste of time and emotion, and what a poor example I set for my daughters. I finally understood my fallacy, unfortunately not when a few daughters developed anorexia nervosa. I still did not realize at that point that my own self-image may have played a part in their body dysmorphia. The idiocy of my actions hit me in the face loud and clear when I moved to an area where the roads were lined with billboards promoting plastic surgery. I was finally able to see clearly on 14 by 48 foot signage, emblazoned in bold color, how foolish this focus was. Beauty is not based on size or shape. The world had duped me into focusing on appearance when indeed we are each enough as we are. Our world is obsessed with physical addictions that cause more harm than value. Not only has the use of prescription drugs increased to dull all types of hurting, but also over-exercising, plastic surgery addiction, self-mutilating, and eating disorders all make us into the perfect images that we believe we need to be, or to take away the pain we feel when we fail in our achievements. These diagnoses are mostly a more recent phenomenon. It is hard to imagine our hard-working ancestors who accomplished daily living tasks for survival by the sweat of their brow being caught up in these delusions. Today, eating disorders affect a person's relationship with food and their body. People with eating disorders have excessive thoughts of food, their body weight or shape, and how to control their intake of food. Types of eating disorders include anorexia nervosa, which is characterized by weight loss or maintenance by extreme dieting, starvation, or too much exercise. Binge eating, which means to frequently consume an unusually large amount of food in one sitting. Bulimia nervosa, with symptoms that include purging, taking laxatives, exercising, or fasting to avoid weight gain after binge eating. And one new one, orthorexia, which refers to an obsessive and extreme focus on pure or clean eating. Orthorexia is not a formal diagnosis yet, so it's difficult to get an accurate number of how many people have it. However, it is a growing trend that health professionals have observed. One may experience an anxious state of mind, a depressed mood, or have a mix of anxiety and depression, says Anna Hindel, a psychotherapist based in New York. People turn to the attempt at controlling food intake or eating their emotions instead of dealing with the underlying problem if untreated. Loving ourselves, along with understanding ourselves, are both critical in battling this new crisis. According to the National Association of Anorexia Nervosa and Associated Disorders, ANAD, the oldest organization to fight eating disorders in the United States, founded in 1976, approximately 30 million Americans live with eating disorders. Eating disorders are the third most common chronic illness among adolescent females, and now 25% of eating disorders sufferers are men. The occurrence of those experiencing eating disorders in the U.S. is highest among those with a binge eating disorder at 5.5% of the population, compared to 2% for bulimia and 1.2% for anorexia. Internationally, global eating disorder prevalence increased from 3.4% to 7.8% of the world's population between 2000 and 2018. 70 million people internationally live with eating disorders. Japan has the highest percentage of eating disorders, followed by Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan, and South Korea. Interestingly, all the top nations affected are in Asia. And horrifyingly, in a world of plenty, about one person dies every hour as a direct result of an eating disorder. People are starving themselves in an attempt to feel better. Each person on this earth is individual and unique, like a beautiful flower of whatever variety they choose to identify with. A bouquet consisting of many species of flowers makes a much more lovely posy than one where all florets are identical. The human race is a diverse lot in length, size, girth, and color, as are floral arrangements. Each of us can and should be ready to blossom in whatever soil we are planted. Holding up society's single focal mirror to measure beauty is not healthy for any of us. Be you, be unique. Loving ourselves may be the hardest form of love we have to learn. Life will throw hard things our way. Each of us has our own challenges to endure, but individual human beings are intrinsically enough as we are. Embrace yourself and your uniqueness. Love of self can make our journeys easier and positively more enjoyable. For some reason, this song, The Rose, sung by Bette Midler, came to mind intertwined with thoughts of loving ourselves. Some say love, it is a river that drowns the tender reed. Some say love, it is a razor that leaves your soul to bleed. Some say love, it is a hunger, an endless aching need. I say love, it is a flower, and you its only seed. It's the heart afraid of breaking that never learns to dance. It's the dream afraid of waking that never takes the chance. It's the one who won't be taken, who cannot seem to give, and the soul afraid of dying that never learns to live. When the night has been too lonely, and the road has been too long, and you think that love is only for the lucky and the strong, just remember in the winter, far beneath the winter snows, lies the seed that with the sun's love, in the spring, becomes the rose. Maybe a mini pep talk from Bruno Mars is easier to decipher. When I see your face, there's not a thing that I would change, 'cause you're amazing just the way you are. And when you smile, the whole world stops and stares because you're amazing just the way you are. When we love ourselves, it's easier to love others. Perhaps the most intriguing example of a radiating effect of loving ourselves was taught to me by a gifted therapist in Twin Falls, Idaho. She introduced the Hawaiian method of Ho'oponopono, which uses love and forgiveness to heal ourselves and thereby extend healing to others. Dr. Ahilikala Hugh Len worked at Hawaii State Hospital for 4 years in a dangerous ward that housed criminally insane patients. Psychologists quit monthly and the staff often called in sick. Afraid of being attacked by patients, people would walk through the ward with their backs against the wall. Dr. Len never saw the patients. From his office, he'd look through their files and would work on himself. As he worked on himself, patients began to heal. He said, "I just kept saying, 'I'm sorry' and 'I love you' over and over again." Unbelievably, after a few months, patients that had formerly been shackled were allowed to walk around freely. Others who'd been heavily medicated were able to decrease their doses, and those previously deemed to need lifelong institutionalization were being freed. Dr. Len's technique may sound utterly impossible, yet it's quite simple. He believes that we all share responsibility for everything we see in our world. By taking personal responsibility for our part and healing the wounded places within ourselves, we can literally heal not only ourselves, but our world. The doctor suggests a 4-stage process for Ho'oponopono work. Whenever a place for healing presents itself in your life, open to the place where the hurt resides within you. After identifying this place, with as much feeling as you can, say these 4 statements. I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. I practice this method of love and forgiveness for myself and others with no strings attached. Though I cannot comprehend how the process works, I can testify it truly does. Loving oneself enough to heal hurts and become whole is not only the greatest way to nurture ourselves, it has a ripple effect that elevates others around us. Chapter 4. Love of All Mankind. Ironically, recent efforts intensely professing that people must love and accept one another equally only seem to have increased the level of animosity, not love. People are critically judging others for their lack of acceptance while displaying their own same lack by their harsh judgments. I think love among mankind is out there, but the more we are told we don't love one another, the more the world believes it and fails to see all the goodness that is going around. We are all playing on the same team of humanity. We can all win with love. A few years ago, our son Casey served a mission in Mexico City. His emails home expressed a deep love for the people of Mexico. In one, Casey spoke of a family of 5 that he had taught and taken to the temple, then commented that he loved the mother of this family as much as his own. Instead of feeling jealous, I was touched by my son's ability to love. When some of our family members returned with Casey to Mexico City after he had come home, the people flocked to acknowledge his presence, greeting him as if he were a famous visiting rock star. My younger son commented that his best friends at home did not care for him as much as these people did his brother. Love builds amazing bonds between persons of different cultures, languages, races, and nationalities. Sir Walter Scott, born in the late 1700s, was a Scottish novelist, poet, historian, and biographer who is often considered both the inventor and the greatest practitioner of the historical novel. He was a gentleman's gentleman of his day and was never known to be unkind or inconsiderate. Little children gathered at his feet when he entered a room. Adults were always anxious to be in his presence. A friend once asked him where he had been taught such courtesy, manners, respect, and even love. Had he been instructed by a special academy, by a private tutor, or at his mother's knee? The answer was none of the above. Sir Walter Scott shared, "When I was a boy about 13, I saw a dog about 50 feet away. I picked up a large stone and threw it at the dog, trying to hit it, but never supposing I would. I hit the dog and broke his leg. After it had been injured, the dog crawled up to me and licked my boots. I have tried since that day to have the same deep abiding love for every soul." Adding impact to the story, Walter survived a childhood bout of polio in 1773 that left him lame with a limp his whole life. I was unable to find more about what happened to the dog, but cannot help but believe Sir Scott tended to it with loving kindness after the animal taught him such a profound, powerful lesson. Animals are often examples of showing loyalty and devotion even to those who do not deserve it. I'm not suggesting that we let ourselves be abused, but that maybe we do not look for offense when none was intended. Perhaps we can assume good intentions unless proven otherwise, and of course, taking lessons on how to love from man's furry best friend cannot hurt. It seems the mentally challenged also often understand love easier than the supposedly mentally proficient. Maybe a barrier of some kind has been removed from their brains to allow an ocean of love to flow forth from their hearts, flooding joy and love upon those around them. While those with special needs may be incorrectly viewed on some occasions as lesser, the love they infuse into the world is immeasurable. Simple acts of goodness performed by those who are fully capable abound as well. A group called Everything Good in the World shared a story from actress Katharine Hepburn's childhood in her own words. Once, when I was a teenager, my father and I were standing in line to buy tickets for the circus. Finally, there was only one other family between us and the ticket counter. This family made a big impression on me. There were 8 children, all probably under the age of 12. The way they dressed, you could tell they didn't have a lot of money, but their clothes were neat and clean. The children were well behaved, all of them standing in line, 2 by 2 behind their parents, holding hands. They were excitedly jabbering about the clowns, animals, and all the acts they would be seeing that night. By their excitement, you could sense that they had never been to the circus before. It would be the highlight of their lives. The father and mother were at the head of the pack, standing proud as could be. The mother was holding her husband's hand, looking up at him as if to say, "You're my knight in shining armor." He was smiling and enjoying seeing his family happy. The ticket lady asked him how many tickets he wanted. He proudly responded, "I'd like to buy 8 children's tickets and 2 adult tickets so I can take my family to the circus." The ticket lady stated the price. The man's wife let go of his hand and her head dropped. The man's lips began to quiver, and then he leaned a little closer and asked, "How much did you say?" The lady again stated the price. The man didn't have the money. How was he supposed to turn and tell his 8 kids they didn't have enough money to take them to the circus? Seeing what was going on, my dad reached into his pocket and pulled out a $20 bill and then dropped it to the ground. We were not wealthy in any sense of the word. My father bent down and picked up the $20 bill and tapped the man on his shoulder and said, "Excuse me, sir, this fell out of your pocket." The man understood what was going on. He wasn't begging for a handout, but certainly appreciated the help in a desperate, heartbreaking, and embarrassing situation. He looked straight into my dad's eyes, took my dad's hand in both of his, and squeezed tightly onto the $20 bill, and then with his lip quivering and with a tear streaming down his cheek replied, "Thank you. Thank you, sir. This really means a lot to me and my family." My father and I went back to our car and drove home. The $20 that my dad gave away is what we were going to buy our own tickets with. Although we didn't get to see the circus that night, we both felt a joy inside of us that was far greater than seeing the circus could ever provide. That day I learned the value to give. The giver is bigger than the receiver. If you want to be large, larger than life, learn to give. Love has nothing to do with what you're expecting to get, only with what you're expecting to give, which is everything. The importance of giving, blessing others, can never be overemphasized because there's always joy in giving. Learn to make someone happy by acts of giving. I personally see another aspect of loving in this story. Catherine's father loved her enough to give her a more valuable gift than a trip to the circus. He taught her by example how to love her fellow man. Not only did he help the family, but he protected their dignity. Just handing the father of the large family the money would not have had the same effect. Katharine Hepburn remembered this lesson her whole life, more than she would have a night at the circus. After attending a theater production with my husband a few years ago, we were discussing the various kinds of love. We did not give anyone money to attend the performance, but we did gain other valuable insights from the experience. We determined that the world is crying out for love, any kind of love. People are hungry to be loved. Perhaps needing some kind of love is one of the reasons for the LGBTQ+ explosion, where in 2020, only 1 to 2% of the baby boomers from my generation identified in one of these categories. Nearly 16% of the younger Generation Z did. Our generations may not be from different races, nor speak different languages, yet we still may not always understand one another on the same level. In his book, Charity Never Faileth, Vaughn J. Featherstone shared, "Love appears to overcome barriers of communication, so we can see each other's hearts like a transparent crystal." Loving our fellow man can literally help us understand how another feels and what he sees from his different perspective. An American business, civic, and religious leader, Spencer W. Kimball, when asked what his hobby was, answered, "I love people." What a great hobby for anyone to have. Love is the ultimate translator between any two persons. I came away from the musical that night with insights from a song that has become one of my favorites, and a go-to for deeper life lessons. I often ask myself what is the most important thing any of us can do with the next 525,600 minutes of our lives. The song is called Seasons of Love by Jonathan Larson. 525,600 minutes, 525,000 moments so dear. 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year? In daylights, in sunsets, in midnights, in cups of coffee, in inches, in miles, in laughter, in strife. In 525,600 minutes, how do you measure a year in a life? How about love? Measure in love, seasons of love. 525,600 minutes, 525,000 journeys to plan, 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a life of a woman or a man? In truths that she learned, or in times that she cried, in bridges he burned, or the way that she died. It's time now to sing out, though the story never ends. Let's celebrate, remember a year in a life of friends. Remember the love, seasons of love. Chapter 5, Love of Country. It seems logical to me that since most people have some choice in where they choose to live, that they would choose a place that they loved or at least liked. Every location has something good to offer its inhabitants, and on the flip side, every habitat also has its own unique challenges. I've always been a pretty patriotic person, so the intense discord in the political arena of my country has been painful to my psyche. Recently, there has been a movement to break the United States up into 5 like-minded geographical areas. Not so United States anymore. It would be sad if the situation came to that. A country is something like a very large family. Members of family do not always share the same views and beliefs, but most try to show some level of courtesy for the other persons out of respect and/or possibly love for one another. I have frequently wondered what has happened since that fateful day of the 9/11 bombings to turn a country that was so patriotically united into one with such animosity. Would dissolving and eliminating current political parties help? Instead of running on party platforms, could voters find an individual of integrity that they could unite beside and balance the warring factions? Or is that too idealistic? Is there any person out there that could create an environment of harmony and incite peace in this mass of humanity? Each country has a flag to represent its sovereignty, and probably something similar to our Pledge of Allegiance. Our pledge has had a journey to become what it is today and is still evolving as a topic of continued controversy. Perhaps reviewing the history of our Pledge of Allegiance will give some background insights into the complicated process of loving our country. Our first pledge was not created until 1887, over 100 years after our country's inception, by Captain George T. Balch. Balch was a veteran of the Civil War who later became an auditor of the New York Board of Education. His pledge read, "We give our heads and hearts to God and our country, one language, one flag!" The pledge that later evolved into the wording closer to what we use today was composed 5 years later in August 1892 by Francis Bellamy, who was a Baptist minister, a Christian socialist, and the cousin of American author Edward Bellamy. Francis Bellamy did not approve of the pledge as Balch had written it, referring to the text as too juvenile and lacking in dignity. The Bellamy Pledge of Allegiance was first published in the September 8th issue of the popular children's magazine, The Youth's Companion, as part of the National Public School celebration of Columbus Day, a celebration of the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's arrival in the Americas. "I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." In 1906, the Daughters of American Revolutions magazine, The American Monthly, used the following wording of the Pledge of Allegiance based on Balch's pledge. "I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands. I pledge my head and my heart to God and my country, one language, one flag." In 1923, the National Flag Conference called for the words "my flag" to be changed to "the flag of the United States," so the new immigrants would not confuse loyalties between their birth countries and the U.S. The words "of America" were added a year later. Congress officially recognized the pledge for the first time in the following form on June 22, 1942. "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." Louis Albert Bowman, an attorney from Illinois, was the first to suggest the addition of "under God" to the pledge. The National Society of the Daughters of American Revolution gave him an award of merit as the originator of this idea. Bowman spent his adult life in the Chicago area and was a chaplain of the Illinois Society of Sons of the American Revolution. At a meeting on February 12, 1948, he led the society in reciting the pledge with the 2 words "under God" added. He said that the words came from Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Although not all manuscript versions delivered to the reporters contained the words "under God," Lincoln may have deviated from his prepared text and inserted the phrase when he said that the nation shall, under God, have a new birth of freedom. Bowman repeated his revised version of the pledge at other meetings. During the Cold War era, many Americans wanted to distinguish the United States from the state atheism promoted by the Marxist-Leninist countries, a view that led to the support for the words "under God" to be added to the Pledge of Allegiance. In 1951, the Knights of Columbus also began including the words "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance. On August 21, 1952, the Supreme Council of the Knights of Columbus at its annual meeting adopted a resolution urging the change to be made universal, and copies of this resolution were sent to the President, the Vice President, as presiding officer of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives. This campaign led to several official attempts to prompt Congress to adopt the Knights of Columbus policy for the entire nation. These attempts were eventually a success. At the suggestion of a correspondent, Representative Louis C. Rabat, a Democrat from Michigan, sponsored a resolution to add the words "under God" to the pledge in 1953. Before February 1954, no endeavor to get the pledge officially amended had succeeded. The final successful push came from Pastor George McPherson Doherty. Some American presidents have honored Lincoln's birthday by attending services at the church Lincoln attended, the New York Avenue Presbyterian Church, by sitting in Lincoln's pew on the Sunday nearest February 12th. On February 7, 1954, with President Eisenhower sitting in Lincoln's pew, the church's pastor, Doherty, delivered a sermon based on the Gettysburg Address entitled, "A New Birth of Freedom." He argued that the nation's might lay not in arms, but rather in its spirit and higher purpose. He noted that the pledge's sentiments could be used by any nation. There was something missing in the pledge, and that which was missing was a characteristic and definitive factor in the American way of life. He cited Lincoln's words, "under God," as defining words that set the United States apart from other nations. President Eisenhower had been baptized a Presbyterian the previous year and responded enthusiastically to Doherty in a conversation following the service. Eisenhower acted upon the suggestion the very next day. On February 8, 1954, Representative Charles Oakman, Republican from Michigan, introduced a bill to that effect. A joint resolution of Congress passed the necessary legislation amending the flag code enacted in 1942, and Eisenhower signed the bill into law on Flag Day, June 14, 1954. Eisenhower said, "From this day forward, the millions of our school children will daily proclaim in every city and town, every village and rural schoolhouse, the dedication of our nation and our people to the Almighty. In this way, we are reaffirming the transcendence of religious faith in America's heritage and future. In this way, we shall constantly strengthen those spiritual weapons which forever will be our country's most powerful resource in peace or in war. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." The sentiment in our country has changed. In September 2013, a case was brought before the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court arguing the pledge violates the Equal Rights Amendment of the Constitution of Massachusetts. In May 2014, Massachusetts' highest court ruled that the pledge does not discriminate against atheists, saying that the words "under God" represent a patriotic, not a religious exercise. In February 2015, New Jersey Superior Court Judge David F. Bauman dismissed another lawsuit, ruling that the Pledge of Allegiance does not violate the rights of those who don't believe in God and does not have to be removed from the patriotic message. Bauman said the student could skip the pledge, but upheld a New Jersey law that says pupils must recite the pledge unless they have conscientious scruples that do not allow it. He noted, as a matter of historical tradition, the words "under God" could no more be expunged from the natural consciousness than the words "in God we trust" from every coin in the land, than the words "so help me God" from every presidential oath since 1789, or than the prayer that has opened every congressional session of the legislative business since 1787. When looking at the Pledge of Allegiance on the internet, I could not find it listed with the words "under God" on any sites. The words were not used during the 2020 DNC convention, although they have not been officially removed. Lawsuits in 2004, 2010, 2014, 2015, and 2019 have tried to remove the words from our Pledge of Allegiance, or end the pledge itself. Why are people striving so hard to remove the mention of a higher power from our country? Personally, I do believe in God. But for those who do not, could the words be viewed as poetic? A metaphor for an omnipotent fatherly figure watching over us? God is and represents the essence of love. Could there be a correlation between the removal of God from our society and the lessening of civility and kindness in our country? Perhaps a move to erase the Pledge of Allegiance, or at least part of it, from our country has also affected its citizens' love and commitment somehow. In my many decades, I have never witnessed so much country bashing until quite recently. good could not come from it. Good comes from love. If we really believe that we are brothers and sisters, as in one big human family, it might make it more difficult to be so harsh with one another, even when we completely disagree. Maybe the only way we can move this mountain is to be the one who will begin to see things in this more loving manner, and then hopefully influence the next person to see it from this perspective, and on and on. The thought certainly makes me want to be and do better. Perhaps that is one reason the song "What the World Needs Now Is Love" by Hal David and Burt Bacharach has been imprinted on my brain during these last few months. Our focus would be better served by drawing together in our similarities while celebrating and assessing the strengths in our differences, than in angrily looking for things to litigate. I have never noticed before that this song not only inspires us to seek love, but is also a prayer to our Creator asking Him to help us do just that. Hopefully, in mentioning this new observation, these lyrics will not soon become politically incorrect. It is a beautiful message for all of us. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. Lord, we don't need another mountain. There are mountains and hillsides enough to climb. There are oceans and rivers enough to cross, enough to last till the end of time. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. Lord, we don't need another meadow. There are cornfields and wheat fields enough to grow. There are sunbeams and moonbeams enough to shine. Oh, listen, Lord, if you want to know. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but just for everyone. Love is literally healing not only to the country, but to the whole world and everyone in it. In 1978, Dr. Robert Naram and his lab of researchers performed a study on rabbits in order to establish the relationship between a high-fat diet and heart health. I find it interesting that the heart happens to be the symbol of love. Instead of expected long-term proven results, they discovered that love and kindness can cause rabbits to be healthier, opening up a potentially much larger paradigm shift. In his study, Dr. Naram analyzed the number of fatty deposits in the small blood vessels of a group of New Zealand white rabbits after they were fed a high diet in fat. The team expected that the rabbits would have fatty deposits in their small blood vessels that reflected their high cholesterol levels. But instead, the unexpected result was that a significant number of rabbits did not. After much examination, the team discovered that a group of rabbits with far healthier blood levels were all under the care of an especially kind postdoctoral student who, in handling them, cuddled the animals, treating them with love and patience. A second similar study confirmed that kind and loving treatment can in fact lead to healthier rabbits. In The Rabbit Effect, a book about this phenomenon, Dr. Kelly Harding introduces profound ideas that both rabbits and people thrive in communities that bolster health by love, connection, and purpose, suggesting that kind and loving treatment can modify health on a molecular, individual, interpersonal, and global level. Scientific data confirms the huge benefits of love. We can actually make our country and the world more emotionally and physically healthy by loving one another. That knowledge is truly incredible. Chapter 6. Love that Surpasses Understanding. Years ago, I read an article about the Caring People Study, done by David McClellan and Carol Franz. In order to determine why some people are exceptionally caring, the psychologists studied members of religious orders and found that the quality separating members who found joy in caring for the poorest of the poor, like Mother Teresa being able to pick worms off of a dying homeless man, from those who responded merely out of duty, was the depth of their personal relationship with a God or supreme being. In their scientific research, they discovered that the common denominator of those able to serve the most despicable of creatures was, according to the article, like the lyrics of the old hymn, "Where charity and love prevail, there God is found." In the act of seeing God in the people they serve, all of the filters of class, race, and status that many people bring to relationships tend to disappear, said Reverend David Nygren from the Study on Religious Orders. They pass through a barrier most of us have based on our own human needs or fears. I find this observation fascinating. When we're able to see outside of ourselves and connect with a higher power, our insecurities wash away, and we tap into something that enables us to be bigger and better than we are alone. This connection magnifies whatever we have to give, as well as how we see the world and its inhabitants around us. I've always been captivated by stories about near-death experiences, or NDEs. One of the first I read as a teen was a small book called Return from Tomorrow by George Ritchie, who at the age of 20 was pronounced clinically dead for 9 minutes while battling pneumonia in an army hospital. The whole book is amazing, but 2 of the stories he shared have stayed with me for decades and been a yardstick for measuring my own standard of loving others. The first took place during the time that he was clinically declared dead while having an out-of-body experience in the Texas Army Hospital hallway. There, the young man who has now become Dr. Ritchie encountered a man made of light, whom he immediately believed to be the Son of God. This being of light took George to a room where he beheld a panoramic screen, displaying simultaneously every episode that took place during his lifetime. Everything was there in full view. The complete movie of the good, the bad, and the ugly of his past 20 years taking place in 360 degrees around him. Some of the images were enjoyable reminders of events that had transpired, and others quite excruciating ones that he would have liked to fast forward. This being then mentally conveyed a question asking George what he had done with his life. George wanted to scream that he had not had enough time, but scanned his life surrounding him and saw an event that he was proud of and answered, "I was an Eagle Scout." The being replied, "That glorified you. How did you love?" "I didn't know. No one told me," George answered. Then Dr. Ritchie shares, "I knew this man loved me. Far more than the power that emanated from his presence was unconditional love, an astonishing love. A love beyond my wildest imagining. This love knew every unlovable thing about me," and he names some less unlovable things, "and accepted and loved me just the same." Then the presence gently shares, "I did tell you. I told you by the life I lived." Don't we all want to be loved like that? For someone to know every unlovable thing about us and love us anyway with pure and unconditional love? When Dr. Ritchie returns to the land of the living a few minutes later and throughout the rest of his life, he's possessed with a desire to continue to look for that kind of love in others. During World War II, he meets a Polish man that the U.S. soldiers had dubbed Wild Bill Cody due to his unpronounceable Polish last name and drooping handlebar mustache. George Ritchie came across this prisoner at Wuppertal, one of the Nazi concentration camps, and determined that the Polish man must not have been in the camp very long because his posture was erect, his eyes were bright, and his energy unstoppable. The man spoke fluent English, French, German, and Russian, in addition to Polish, so he had become an unofficial camp translator, working 15 to 16 hours a day. Wild Bill always had time to help the next person. While reading through Wild Bill's papers, George found out that his original assumption was wrong, and that the man had survived on the same starvation diet in the same disease-ridden barracks as other prisoners for 6 long years. Much of that time, Wild Bill had spent counseling forgiveness to the different factions of the prisoners who hated each other almost as much as they did the Germans. When Ritchie tried to explain to Wild Bill that it was not easy for some of them to forgive because so many had lost family members, Wild Bill told George his story. "We lived in the Jewish section of Warsaw. My wife, our 2 daughters, and our 3 little boys. When the Germans reached our street, they lined everyone up against a wall and opened up with machine guns. I begged to be allowed to die with my family, but because I spoke German, they put me in a work group. I had to decide right then whether to let myself hate the soldiers who'd done this. It was an easy decision, really. I was a lawyer. In my profession, I'd seen too often what hate can do to people's minds and bodies. Hate had just killed the 6 people who mattered most to me in the world. I decided then that I would spend the rest of my life, whether it was a few days or many years, loving every person I came in contact with. This was the power that had kept a man both mentally and physically healthy in the face of every deprivation. Love had preserved him in a demoralizing concentration camp for 6 long years. The full power of love is unfathomable by the human mind. In the New Testament's first book of Corinthians, chapter 13, the importance of love, also called charity, is detailed by the Apostle Paul, formerly known as Saul, who had experienced a thing or two about love during his life-changing experiences. "Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, and have not charity, I am become as a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy, and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains, and have not charity, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. Charity suffereth long, and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself. It is not puffed up. doth not behave itself unseemingly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Charity never faileth. But whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know even as I also am known. And now abideth faith, hope, and charity, these three, but the greatest of these is charity. If I'm interpreting Paul's poetic passage correctly, he is telling us that without charity, we have achieved nothing. Our trip to earth has been wasted if we cannot learn to love. Paul puts it quite bluntly. Though I bestow all my gifts to feed the poor, though I give my body to be burned and have not charity, it profits me nothing. Ouch. Whether or not one reads or believes the Bible, this message is to be considered. No matter what else we accomplish here, Paul proposes that loving others is the greatest accomplishment. There are examples of unparalleled love all around us that never make the nightly news, at least not as often as conflict and acts of hate are portrayed. During the COVID quarantine, the comedian, actor, director, and producer John Krasinski created a little online broadcast from his home called Some Good News, SGN. It was a breath of fresh air in dark and dismal times. We don't have to be famous or wealthy or extremely gifted to find something we can do to spread the love. Each person has the power within them to add light and love to this planet in some small way. We just need to remember to look for simple things that we can do and to really see the people who cross our paths. I remember watching a broadcast on television which graphically displayed desperate famine around the world, especially affecting children. The images tugged on my heartstrings, and I made the mental comment that it was too bad that one person could not make a dent or difference in the needs around the globe. Then into my mind came the thought, but you can. You can make a difference for one of these children. The thought would not let me go, and I pursued it with an addictive passion over the next year. There was an agency called Americans for African Adoption that had a list of 17 things a family needed to do to bring a child to this country. I completed almost all of them in record time, references, background checks, medical appointments, etc., and had only one remaining item, the home visit, before we were ready to proceed and receive a child. My saga is not a happily ever after example like one would suppose. Perhaps I should end the experience here, but I want to be real. Unfortunately, what I did not realize in all my manic pursuits was that I had not fully gotten my spouse on board. He finally admitted to me, after even going to the doctor to get a physical for the adoption paperwork, that he initially thought my actions were motivated merely by a temporary fad that I was going through, and expressed that he personally felt he had already raised enough children with our own 6. His feelings were not unreasonable. My husband is a generous man, but adoption was something he just was not comfortable doing. I did not even attempt to recoup the funds that I had paid the organization. They could use them to further their mission elsewhere with another family. The agency agreed that it was not fair to bring a child into a home unless both parents were 100% on board. To this day, the adventure that we missed out on haunts me at times. But unification by supporting my spouse was more important, and I have found other ways to give and serve. The opportunities out there to distribute love and compassion are endless. A song came out in 1985 that could be considered the anthem for spreading love worldwide. 46 famous vocalists showed up to form an ultimate musical supergroup, and a single song was created. We Are the World, written by Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie, sold more than 20 million copies for charity. The album later won 3 Grammys and raised more than $60 million for humanitarian work in Africa and the United States. This song is a tribute to the ability of all people to make a difference, as well as a simple war cry to inspire positive energy and momentum around the world in loving one another by using whatever talents each of us possesses. There comes a time when we heed a certain call, when the world must come together as one. There are people dying. Oh, it's time to lend a hand to life, the greatest gift of all. We can't go on pretending day by day that someone somewhere soon will make a change. We're all a part of God's great family, and the truth, love is all we need. We are the world, we are the children. We are the ones who make a brighter day, so let's start giving. There's a choice we're making. We're saving our own lives. It's true, We'll make a better day, just you and me. There are several more verses, but this one gives the overall idea. It's up to us. Unfathomable love often occurs when a person is able to sacrifice themselves for another. Gut-wrenching fictional characters abound in literature and film that shock, humble, and at times make us cry. I apologize for any spoilers. Henry Stampler in Armageddon, Tony Stark in Avengers Endgame, Spock in Star Trek II, Charlotte in Charlotte's Web, Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, and Sidney Carton in The Tale of Two Cities. Many characters from Star Wars series altruistically sacrifice themselves. Though these are not actual people who lived on this earth, they still move us. Real-life heroes sacrifice a part of their lives for others and often inspire us in our world today. Parents, teachers, healthcare professionals, emergency responders. The profession does not matter as much as the generous spirit residing inside the individual. Individuals giving for others is a beautiful thing to behold. Corrie ten Boom, one of these heroes, wrote a book called The Hiding Place about her experience as a Jew during the Second World War. She is an amazing example of love. But her sister Betsy possessed the kind of love that surpasses understanding, the kind that we wonder if we could ever be capable of. While Corrie was praying for the people suffering in the war camps, her sister Betsy was not only grateful for the fleas in their barracks that allowed them more privacy, but she prayed for those who were dropping the bombs and those who were inflicting the immense suffering. Betsy had the deeper discernment that the Germans who were creating these heinous acts may be in even greater agony and were in fact the ones in need of the most healing. There is an unbelievable power in forgiving. It unleashes boundless love. The ultimate example of sacrificial love would have to be Jesus Christ. Regardless of whether you believe him to be half divine or merely a teacher, history lets us know that he did indeed exist. If you are a believer, he died so that all the rest of us could live forever. If not, his story can still inspire us to seek a love beyond what is usually comprehensible by mere humans. We were created to love one another. May we magnify that charge. Chapter 7. Love Never Ends. Returning to Viktor Frankl, he writes in Man's Search for Meaning that his wife's image comes into his mind while he is in a Nazi concentration camp, and that he does not know if she's alive or dead, but a thought transfixes him. The truth set into song by so many poets that love is the ultimate and highest goal to which man can aspire. The salvation of man is through love and in love. He said that now he understood how a man who has nothing left in this world still may know bliss, be it only for a moment in the contemplation of his beloved. Still clinging to his wife's image, an impression crosses his mind. I didn't know if she was alive. I knew only one thing, which I have learned well by now. Love goes very far beyond the physical person of the beloved. It finds its deepest meaning in his spiritual being, in his inner self. Whether or not he is actually present, whether or not he is alive at all, ceases to somehow be of importance. Love is everlasting and eternal. It cannot be destroyed by time or space. When a person passes on to the next dimension, the deceased does not take from us the love we feel for them. It still exists inside of us. Similarly, I believe that the beloved one who exits this earth also carries part of our love with them to wherever they're going. Our love is not divided by the exit, but multiplied when they go. It gives me some consolation that many of the things that I have not been able to totally comprehend here, I may still be able to add upon, growing in understanding and knowledge as my essence continues in the great beyond. I do believe there is a God who loves us more than we can understand, and that knowledge gives hope. Hope that he knows us enough to look past our glaring mistakes, their edges softened through his loving eyes, and that we will be able to love and accept the person that he has helped us to become. Even more, that we have been able to love all those placed in our path whom he has needed us to love here for him. Families create a chain of love through the generations. We are all linked father to son, mother to daughter from generation to generation. In the Old Testament, the prophet Malachi tells us, "Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, and he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse." The love we feel in families is of such value and consequence that without it, we are cursed. This chain of loving continues backward in time and forward to the future, becoming vital links in the continuum. Visualize the beauty of a chain of devoted ancestors, along with their posterity, holding hands and connecting one with another to offer the love needed for each member of the human family. It is mind-boggling. The amount of love possible is unending, immense, and so very needed, maybe more today than at any time in history. A friend of mine was researching relationships on a site called Family Search and was amazed to find that she was related to some of the people she regularly associated with. She went on to find that many of those she had become acquainted with in this life were distant cousins, and she expressed how that knowledge had given her such a sense of love and belonging. I understand these emotions. In an existence that can at times feel overwhelming and meaningless, it has added dimension in my own life to discover ancestors whose stories and own struggles have reached into my heart. It is difficult for mortal minds to comprehend how love never ends. Things to us appear more finite, not infinite. Poets and writers at times reflect upon the recurring theme of enduring love. In researching this project, I was surprised to discover that Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote a sequel to his classic musical hit, The Phantom of the Opera, called Love Never Dies. It has played around the world but has yet to come to Broadway. In it, the Phantom survived the fire and 10 years later is living in New York City as the owner and mastermind of an amusement park on Coney Island called Phantasma. The Phantom has the mother and daughter who helped him escape from the Paris Opera House fire dispatch a letter to his beloved Christine, inviting her to come and perform at Phantasma. We find out that their love for each other lives on and discover that Christine has a 10-year-old son fathered by the Phantom. There are many more ins and outs of intrigue, but before dying in the Phantom's arms, Christine sings the title song that he has written for her entitled Love Never Dies. On stage, they remind us that love lives on. The world repeats this ideal of eternal love and recreates the theme over and over. Love will march on in various forms and capacities until the end of time. For love is the nucleus of all that makes life worthwhile. I am an over-planner by nature and have not yet fully accepted the often futile outcomes of any attempts to guide my destiny. Several years ago, I made a list of evolving songs I would like to be sung at my funeral. Although I will not be around to see the request carried out, one of my suggested funeral songs is Window to His Love by Julie Azevedo. There are 2 more exceptional verses along with catchy chorus, but the first verse goes like this. I want to be the window to his love, so you can look through me and you'll see him. I want to be so pure and clear that you won't even know I'm here, 'cause his love will shine brightly through me. That is my ultimate goal. Since I was a child, I have felt there is a presence that I cannot see, so much greater than myself, who has never given up on me as he tends to and mends my many weaknesses. I know that he wants me to try to understand how great a love can be, and he keeps reminding me, so I will keep seeking to learn what I need to learn on the subject. As my short glimpse into this powerful and most crucial force on earth draws to an end, I echo the words of Handel, the composer of the Messiah, who said to King George II, My Lord, I should be sorry if I only entertained them. I wish to make them, in addition to myself, better. Accordingly, I hope that there's at least one thing in this brief book that might be motivational to any who read it, and that does not offend anyone in the process. My simple goal is to enhance love and diminish the desire to judge. May we each pause as needed to draw sustenance from spiritual filling stations along this rocky road called life, to enable us to love to our maximum potential wherever we are along our own unique journeys. I will end with another insight from the inspired Mother Teresa, one of my heroes and an ultimate example of loving others. I'm not sure exactly what heaven will be like, but I know that when we die, and it comes time for God to judge us, He will not ask, how many good things have you done with your life? Rather, He will ask, how much love did you put into what you did? Acknowledgements. Most of the muses responsible for this manuscript dwell somewhere beyond Earth's realm, but I feel blessed to wield their pen and capture their thoughts while here. Thank you also to Susie G., Sandy S., Terry S., Julie H., and Stephanie P., who are willing to lend their insights on my fledgling attempt at this multifaceted topic. I also appreciate my darling granddaughter Ashley June, who cried as she read the first draft and then shared her artistic talents for the cover. She is definitely an example of love in my life. There may never be enough love in the world, but thank you to any who have shared a bit of theirs with me, as well as with others along this journey. Loving is unquestionably a group project. Works cited may be found in the printed copy of this book. Thank you. This has been Love More, Judge Less by Teresa Meyerhofer Christensen, narrated by Teresa Meyerhofer Christensen.